Hey team, Yasin here, and in this training, we're going to be going over the 6W system for health transformation. I am super excited for this training because it is the final training inside of module number 3. And so what we are doing inside of this training is we are going ahead and closing out the show. And so this entire journey inside of module 3 is going to come out with a close, but we're going to be ending it with a bang. And so I'm going to go ahead and let you know from the very onset of this training, this is going to be one of the best trainings in the entire module, hands down. And so do not discount this training simply because of the fact that it is the last one in the module. You know what they say, we save the best for last. And so I just want to make sure that you are strapped in, you are ready to go because it is party time. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and hop right into it. As always, we do have the training outline available for your reference in the future. And then the very first thing that we're going to go ahead and do inside of this training is we're going to go ahead and take a stroll. We're going to go ahead and take a trip down module 3 memory lane. And so I'm going to go ahead and warn you right now because you got to be ready because it's about to get all nostalgic up in here because we're going to go ahead and revisit all of the main concepts that we talked about inside of module 3 very quickly and very briefly. And so in the very beginning of the module, we started off this module first talking about the 6 W's of transformation and the 6 W's of health transformation. And so we said what, why, who, how, when, and where, and how those 6 W's of transformation can be applied to any of the 4 areas of life. And then we specifically introduced the 4 pillars within the area of life of health. And we said that there is nutrition, there is sleep, there is movement, and there is recharge. And so that first training went ahead and laid the land for what it is that we were going to go ahead and talk about inside of the entire module. From there, we went ahead and talked about the what, why, and who of health. And specifically, this training dealt with the why underneath the why. And so we talked about how when dealing with students, if a student has a desire, then that means that somewhere out there, that future version reality exists for that student and that they can achieve it if they become the person and put in the work. We said that as a coach, when we are looking at our students, we are looking at them and speaking to them as if they are the version of themselves that they want to become, as if they have already achieved what it is that they want. And so what we are doing is we are pouring into them and speaking into them the identity that they want to become. And so we are looking at our students and we are saying, hey, you can do this. You are powerful. I am here to remind you about how powerful you are, and I'm not here to fix you because you are not broken. You just need to figure out how to access that power that is already inside of you. That is why I am here as your remote wellness practitioner, right? And so inside of that training, we talked about how the RWP coach is the one that is providing the borrowed belief in order for the student to be able to take action, even if they might not have the full belief in themselves, which then influences their experience and results, which then feeds around and feeds into their belief again. Okay, so that's what we talked about inside of that training. We then went ahead and started going through the first W of the first pillar of health, which was nutrition. And we went ahead and broke down exactly what food is. We went ahead and talked about the different categories of food, as well as what food is made up of by being able to actually read nutrition facts and nutrition labels. So that's what we talked about in that training. From there, we talked about what to eat. Inside of the what to eat training, we all talked about the blood sugar roller coaster and how most people don't even know what it is. And then we went ahead and talked about the 8 tools for balancing blood sugar specifically. And that's what that entire training was about. From there, we went ahead and hopped into Nutrition Why. Nutrition Why was a very straightforward training for us. We talked about why diets don't work. We talked about the 8 switches of the new nutrition paradigm. And overall, we talked about why nutrition was so important, right? So that's what we talked about inside of that training. From there, we went ahead and talked about the how questions of nutrition. And we started off with talking about how much to burn, specifically about nutrition. And so we talked about how the body works and how it's similar to a car. However, unlike a car, when it has more energy than it can actually use, it stores it. And when it hits empty, it goes ahead and utilizes the energy stores, aka its fat reserves, right? From there, we went ahead and talked about how all diets work, which was just a caloric deficit. And so we even talked about how the keto diet works and how all these other diets work and how the next fad diet diet works and how all diets actually work. And then we went ahead and talked about understanding metabolism and how metabolism works, and really starting to uncover what people call the boogeyman of metabolism, and understanding metabolism at 5 different levels and exactly how to bust those metabolism myths, right? From there, we went ahead and talked about how much to eat. How much to eat was all about measuring and tracking food. And so we talked about, hey, how to actually use a food scale, how to actually measure and track food. We learned about the 5 levels of measuring and tracking, and that is how we actually completed our entire equation, which was energy you eat minus energy you burn equals the energy that is in a surplus or a deficit. And so we understood each of the 5 levels for that. From there, we went ahead and jumped over to talking about how to eat, and the how to eat training was all about conscious eating versus limbic eating. And then we specifically talked about the 7 tools for conscious eating. So that's what that training was all about. From there, nutrition journey continues. When and where. We then talked about the when to eat. And we said that when to eat was all about consistency, because our mind loves freedom, but our body loves routine. And then where to eat was all about clearing the clutter inside of our nutrition environment. From there, we went ahead and finalized and closed out the nutrition section with the final W question of who with nutrition. And we said that nutrition who was all about the stories that we tell ourselves about food and the stories that we tell ourselves about our body. And so we talked about how whatever you are experiencing in life right now is all because of your beliefs and your current beliefs. And so if you want to know what someone's current beliefs are, then all you have to do is notice what they are currently experiencing. Inside of that training, we also went ahead and talked about how to speak to your students about this. And we said, hey, don't you dare overwhelm your student with identity work too quickly, right? We talked about how they're literally going to ghost you. And don't try to be the human Google, because it's not about the information, it's about the transformation. And so all of that information is already on Google. You don't got to memorize it. They don't pay you for information, they pay you for transformation, right? From there, after that, we got into the second pillar of health finally, and we went ahead and talked about movement, and we talked about the 6 W's of movement all in one training. We talked about the what, why, how, when, where, and who of movement. We said that, hey, we're going to go ahead and reframe exercise as movement, and movement is just play. And then we went ahead and talked about 3 methods in order to actually be able to move. We talked about the movement menu. We talked about walking and the importance of walking. And then we talked about how to move the advanced version. And we said that there are 4 levels to that advanced version, but nothing serious that you got to know, because of the fact that 99% of your students are going to be just focused on the simple movement methods, okay? From there, we went ahead and connected pillar number 1 and pillar number 2, which was nutrition and movement. And we went ahead and talked about 3 points. Point number 1 was expectations of fat loss and muscle gain. Point number 2 was calories and movement. And then point number 3 was, is it all about calories? Is it all about counting, tracking steps? Is it all about tracking in general? We went ahead and talked about those 3 points inside of that training. And then from there, we went ahead and got into the third pillar of health, which was sleep. And we went ahead and knocked out all 6 W's of sleep: why, what, where, when, how, and who. And so when we talked about what sleep actually is, we learned about the sleep cycle. We talked about how to be able to get rid of your alarm clock so it doesn't wake you up in the wrong cycle, and so that way you feel tired. We then talked about the big 3 of sleep, and we said that once you get these big 3 in order, the how becomes effortless. And so the big 3 was sleep where, aka the 10 sleep environment changes. We then talked about sleep when and timing consistency and the importance of understanding the circadian rhythm. And then we also talked about sleep when, preparation, and the 16 sleep prep habits. Those 3 went ahead and made up the big 3 of sleep. And then after that, we then talked about the how of sleep. And so inside of that training, we talked about how to fall asleep, how to fall back asleep, how to wake up early, how you feel in the morning, how to nap, and how to track sleep. And so that was a doozy of a training all about sleep. Very, very, very valuable, and definitely a game changer. From there, we went ahead and finally got to talking about the 4th and last pillar of health, which is the 6 W's of recharge. And so inside of that training, we went ahead and talked about what recharge is, why recharge is important, how, when, where, and who, all about recharge. And we say that recharge are basically activities that help you transition from being drained, stressed, limbic self into becoming your recharged, relaxed, conscious self, so that way you can tackle this thing called life much better. And in order to do that, we went ahead and introduced 5 tools of recharge. And so inside of that training, we went ahead and talked in depth in regards to all 5 of those tools about recharging. And so that really is the trainings that we went ahead and talked about inside of this module, which is really cool to step back and see all of them and really see all of the concepts inside of one training and one document like we have here. But then along the way, we also talked about some other things. We talked about some concepts, we had some fun, and we had some activities, right? So let's talk about some of the other concepts from module 3 that we discussed, right? We talked about how human beings have the same brain for the last 200,000 years, and as a result, times have changed. We no longer live in the same world and the same time that the vast majority of humans lived in, and as a result, school and society have failed to keep up and educate its people on the skills that are necessary in order to thrive in the modern world. And this is why what it is that we are doing here at the Remote Wellness Academy is so important. We also talked about binary thinking and continuum thinking. We talked about not thinking black and white and understanding that there are unlimited options in between when you actually make that switch. We talked about how everyone else teaches and how we do not teach. We don't want to put people's brains on fire and vomit all over them, right? And so we said that it's about the transformation, not about the information. We also talked about the clouds versus the dirt, the macro versus the micro, the strategic versus the action. And we talked about the strategic cadence and then balancing that with putting in the work. And so basically all of that boils down to be able to understand, hey, we don't want to have Niagara syndrome. We want to plan ahead of time so that way we don't take a fall later on in our life, later on in our week, later on in our month, later on in our year, because we understand that every battle is won before it is fought. And then we balance that with taking action, facing resistance, and doing the dang work. And so this is how we strike the perfect balance between the strategic and the action. Now from there, inside of our memory lane over here, we want to go ahead and revisit some of the fun we had in Module 3. Obviously, who could forget the infamous Coach Yasin, what are you saying, cat? That was definitely a fun meme that made its way into many trainings. Of course, yes, Coach Yasin, my eyes have been opened. Who could forget that as well? Mind blown. How many times did we have our mind blown inside of this training? As well as, of course, double facepalm. Who could forget double facepalm, right? From there, we also had a number of pulse checks. Of course, don't forget my own very brand of glue. Stick with me, you're doing great. The Yasin glue. Of course, the pulse check that would happen every once in a while, making sure that everyone was still alive as we went ahead and got through this training. And then of course, who could forget the one and only, our friend in his office chair, and he had so many escapes as he went ahead and took so many escapades around the world as he was going ahead and taking breaks, and he even took a journey to the moon. As you can see, I've gone ahead and compiled for you, just for the sake of nostalgia, going ahead and looking at all of the different places that our friend visited throughout Module 3. And then of course, who could forget all of the amazing, awesome activities that we had throughout Module 3, all of the experiments, all of the activities, all of the challenges when we talk about the water, the energy, metabolism, conscious eating, when, where, beliefs, steps, sleep, recharge. We had so many awesome activities, experiments, and challenges throughout Module 3 as well. So really taking a step back and looking at like, wow, not only was that a lot of work, but also it was a lot of transformational work, right? Really being able to put in the work necessary in order for us to be able to have a transformation within our health, even though that isn't the primary objective of this program. This program is based around helping you make a 6-figure income online. Of course, being able to have at least a little bit of the taste of what your students are going to go through was absolutely critical. And so that's why we went ahead and had you guys go through an expedited version of a lot of the activities, experiments, and challenges that we are going to be revisiting here in a couple modules from now for your students. And so when I said that it was about to get all nostalgic up in here, I was not joking. It is really insane to step back and look at how far we have come inside of this module. And so this is what I want you to know. After looking at all of that, and after seeing and revisiting all of that, what I want you to know is that all of it, what we just went over, this, ladies and gentlemen, is the 6W system for health transformation. This is the toolbox, right? When we talk about the toolbox of health, when we talk about the 4 pillars, nutrition, sleep, movement, and recharge, and then we talk about the 6W questions within each of those 4 pillars, that is what we are talking about when we talk about the toolbox that you are going to have at your disposal with all of the seeds and the references that we have planted. Because here's the thing that you need to know. Any single one of the W's by themselves in just one of the pillars of health can completely transform someone's life, right? What happens when you actually put all of them together into a system, right? When you put them all together into a system, what happens is that you can help someone have a completely different experience with their health, with their body, with themselves, and with their life. And so when put together, boom, that's when you've radically transformed and changed someone's entire life and the trajectory of their life, okay? And so why do students pay for your transformation program? The answer to that question is because it is transformative. And the cool part about all of this is that this isn't very hard stuff that we're talking about. It's actually fun. And so now that you have such a massive toolbox with the 6 W's and the 4 pillars, when we get into module 5 and start putting your program together, you can literally pick and choose from the toolbox depending on each student and what they need the most, right? Think about it. Just for an example, when somebody finally understands their why, right? Hypothetically, why underneath the why, or when someone is actually finally hydrated and well slept, right? They've actually taken their sleep and implemented a lot of stuff that you learned about sleep. Those are the simple things that are absolutely and completely life-changing. And so this toolbox that we set out to plant seeds and references for is what we're going to utilize in module 5 when we actually structure your transformation program, right? So just as a recap, right now we're in phase number 1. As you can start to see, we're starting to put together that power that we're then going to go ahead and put into production. And so right now we're ending out and closing out module 3. But then when we get here to module 5, that's when we're going to go ahead and start putting your transformation program together from this toolbox, right? And so what's going to happen is that you are going to have a 12-week program. And imagine, what's going to happen is that you can literally just take one piece of a 6W from just one pillar and you can turn that into a week inside of your program, right? This was the entire goal of module 3. The entire goal was for you to be able to have a massive toolbox of understanding for you to be able to transform your health and the health of your students, right? So now with this module, you have a big enough toolbox that even if a student stayed with you for years, you would be able to explore these topics more and more in depth with them. And so some of you, after hearing that, might have this question, but I don't know if I can actually help somebody for that long. But here's the thing that you need to remember. When you have a student and they meet with you weekly, especially in the one-on-one setting, what you have to understand is that they are not coming to you for knowledge the way that you have learned it here in module 3. That's not what they're doing. You're not going to be sitting there talking to them about, for example, the 5 tools of recharge, right? You don't explain it to them in the way that we talked about it, right? We're going to talk more about exactly how you're going to explain it to them later. But what's going to end up happening is that you're actually just going to be picking one of the tools out of your toolbox and then helping them implement that, right? And so how that's going to look is, like we said, just pick one tool of recharge, for example, and then you just help them implement that in their life. You don't teach them anything more than what they can actually implement. And so that is why the 5 tools of recharge, again, just as an example, might be a concept that takes weeks for somebody to actually build into a habit for themselves. And so even though you learned it in like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, something like that inside of this module, now that it's a tool in your toolbox and you're going to get more practice on using it in the upcoming modules, it's going to be something that your students can actually work on for many weeks. Does that make sense? And so remember, what you will be helping your students with is not the information. Even though this module for you, because you are getting the certification, was a lot more knowledge and information based, that is not what you are necessarily focusing on with your students, especially in a one-on-one format. What you're helping them do is the doing aspect of it, right? We talked about this when we talked about the gap of where the true value of remote wellness is. And we talked about the transformation gap and really being able to bridge that gap between knowing and doing. And that is what people are willing to pay a handsome premium for. And so on every other school, every other college, university, institute, degree, certification, their approach is all about information. The Remote Wellness Academy's approach is all about transformation, right? This approach was designed to help bridge the gap between knowing and doing. And that is only possible when we focus on transformation, not information. And so when we get to module 5, that is going to be where we go ahead and talk about the accountability piece and how you can actually get people to do via the process of transformation module, okay? And so what you have done here inside of this module is that you have built for yourself a very solid foundational toolbox to become a successful remote wellness practitioner. And so this module is one of the key foundational pieces, along with module 2 and module 4 of your remote wellness practice skyscraper. And so if you look at all of the skyscrapers, whenever you look at how people build a building, right, how the construction workers and the construction companies build buildings, all of the skyscrapers, all of the buildings have a foundation underneath them. And so when we talk about the foundation, these modules, this phase, this certification is that foundation for you to be able to then go out and make 6+ figures online income remotely, okay? And so it is this foundation that you are setting up inside of phase number 1 of this program that is going to set you up for success in phase number 2 of the program when we get into the income and business training, okay? So do you now see how this module and every training inside of this module allows you to have such a deep toolbox, a deep skill set that is going to serve you for the rest of your life? What you are doing is you are literally transforming your life, the life of everyone around you, and your students while providing insane value. What happens is that you become an asset. You become so extremely valuable to every single person that you come across, no matter if they are a child or if they are an expert. You can help transform each and every human being that you come across with what you are learning inside of this program, okay? What you can do is you can become someone who can provide real transformation for anyone. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is the skill set in a timeless $1 trillion industry that is going to put food on the table for you and your family for the rest of your life. But remember, the definition of a skill is knowledge times reps, knowledge times experience reps, right? That is how you actually acquire a skill. And so although you now have the knowledge through this module, we are soon in upcoming modules going to put in the reps. We are going to get the experience so that way you can further develop this new skill set for yourself. Because ultimately you want to remember that even though you may not be ready right now, it is through this process that you will become ready. And then after all of that, finally, I want you to always remember that there are no tests here, there is no exam here, there are no grades here, there is no A, B, C, D, E, F, G, okay? There is none of that here. This is not a traditional school because the traditional school system is broken. The only test here is a real world test in which you are going to make money and you are going to transform people's lives. That is the ultimate test of the practice from everything that you are getting outside of this program, okay? And so all of this knowledge is here for you as a reference. As we have planted the seeds, those seeds will grow in the future, and that is ultimately what we are leading up to. Does that make sense? I hope that is 100% crystal clear for you. Now, as we start to close out memory lane here and we start to really put a close to this module, I want to go ahead and really quickly talk to you about your 2 journeys, right? So if you remember in module 1, we talked about your 2 journeys. And what I want to do is I want to recap the promise that we laid out for you. We said that in module 1, we said that this program was going to be, number 1, a journey for yourself in phase number 1, that you were going to learn how to think completely differently. You're going to learn how to interact with yourself completely differently. You're going to learn how to interact with others completely differently. You're going to learn the science and art of how to transform your life and the lives of others. And so we've gone ahead and talked about a lot of these points already, but remember, we are not done with phase number 1 yet. And then we also said that for most successful people, it takes them years and decades for them to be able to learn what it is that you are going to learn in phase number 1 over the next couple modules. And we're going to install what takes people decades, you are going to learn in just a few weeks and in just a few months, okay? That's what we said was the journey for yourself. And then we said the journey for your clients. We said that the same transformational experience that you are going through inside of this phase is going to be the same one, similarly, that you walk your students to. Right? And so even though it's going to be packaged differently, because obviously they are not becoming remote wellness practitioners, you need to always keep in mind that this is both a journey for yourself as well as a journey for your clients/students. Okay. So how do you think we're stacking up so far? Remember, we still got a little bit of module 1 left, but we are absolutely crushing it. And so chances are that throughout this entire journey, in module 3, you've probably experienced some transformation in your own health and your life, if not both. And so what is going to happen is that you are going to take what it is that you gained here in Module 3, and it is going to have an impact for the rest of your life, even in your professional life. I told you this before in a previous training. This is what I thought being productive looked like. And then once I went through Module 3, right, my own version over the course of a decade, I understood, hey, sleep, recharge, nutrition, movement, the 4 pillars of health, that is actually what is required in order to be productive. And so guess what? We're not done with phase number 1 just yet. Strap in, because it is only going to continue to get better and better from here on out. And I'm super, super excited for you to experience the rest of phase number 1 as well. Now, here's the thing though. After hearing all of that, some students might say, hey, Coach Yassine, I still don't have a 6-pack though yet, right? I don't think I can do this. Coach Yassine, even with Module 3, I'm not in the best shape of my life, and I don't know if people are going to listen to me. And so here's my question to you. Do you know what game you are playing? Okay. Because a couple points that you need to keep in mind here. Point number 1, are you trying to help athletes get to the Olympics, or are you trying to cure cancer? You're not, right? And so we talked about this when we talk about the health distribution curve, health population distribution curve. There's medicine and those people who have to cure diseases. And then there are those who are dealing with athletes. And we are here in the spectrum of wellness. And so it's not like you got to have some PhD doctorate in order to be able to help people with wellness. Point number 2, what people value is your experience. This is what we talked about when we talked about the industry proven fact. People don't want to learn from someone who is perfect or never struggled. It's your experience and your struggles that make you valuable. That's very important. That's the second point to keep in mind. And then finally, point number 3, which is that people are not buying your 6-pack abs. They're buying their own transformation. And so don't try to make this selfish or about yourself, right? We talked about this when we talked about the gap and the true value of remote wellness and what people are actually purchasing. And so ultimately, all of these problems that when you are thinking about, hey, you know what? I'm not good enough. I haven't gotten there yet. All of those problems come as a result of not understanding the game that you are playing. And so what do we mean by that? I want to go ahead and take a couple minutes here, and I want to talk to you about what game are you playing, right? Because here's a question for you. What is the end to the game of health? Do you know what game you are playing? Are you playing a finite game, or are you playing an infinite game? Maybe you have no idea what I'm talking about. Let me explain. In science, there is a subject called game theory. And game theory states that there are 2 types of games that can be played. The first type of game is what is called a finite game, and the second type of game is what is called an infinite game. Okay? And so what are finite games and infinite games? Finite games, just as the word sounds, are games that end, and infinite games are games that don't end. And so visually, this is what it looks like, right? There are finite games, and they have a start, and they have an end. And then there are infinite games. And infinite games do not have an end. They keep going on and on and on. And so what in the world are we talking about here, right? Finite and infinite games? How the heck does this apply to anything, right? What does games have to do with anything that we are learning here? Let me explain again. You have to know what type of game you are playing in life. Why? Because it makes all the difference. Too many people make the mistake of not knowing which game they are playing. They don't even know that there are 2 types of games that they could be playing, right? What they do is they take games that are infinite and they try to make them finite. And they talk about winning and they talk about beating their competition. They say things like, hey, once I get to a certain weight, then I'll be happy. Once I get to a certain weight, then I'm going to be qualified as a remote wellness practitioner. Once I make X amount of money, then I'm finally going to have what it is that I want. I'm really frustrated. I'm not losing weight fast enough. I'm really frustrated. I'm not making money fast enough. I'm really frustrated. I'm not getting to where I want to go fast enough. And they say so many other statements like that. And here's the thing. All of these statements are all made by someone who does not understand or know the game that they are playing. This causes a lot of beginners, amateurs, and newbies who are new to the game of life a lot of frustration. What does that mean? It means that it's critical to recognize the game that you are in and how to approach it with the right mindset. Now, at this point, you might be like this meme right here, right? You might be like, Coach Yassine, what are you talking about? I'm trying to figure out what in the world you're talking about, but I'm not fully yet 100% grasping it. Help me understand. Well, let me explain. You have to understand the difference between finite and infinite games, and it is going to make all the difference in your life, okay? What is an example? An example of a finite game is a game that has a start and an end. Think about baseball. And an infinite game is a game that doesn't end. think about your health journey. Is this starting to make sense? Stick with me here, right? Because what I'm about to explain to you right now, I'm kind of doing this in layers. I'm kind of going deeper and deeper and deeper. As we go layers here, I'm telling you this is going to blow your entire mind, okay? Because how exactly are finite and infinite games different, right? We talked about baseball and we talked about health. Well, inside of the guide, there's all these character traits about infinite games and finite games. Don't worry, I'm not going to go and read through all of these. These are good for you to reference in the future. But the big thing that you need to know is that the difference between finite games and infinite games is that obviously we talked about beginning and end. In infinite games, there is no beginning and end. In finite games, there's a clear finish line. In infinite games, there is no finish line, okay? In finite games, at the end, there is a winner and there is a loser. There is a comparison. There's, hey, I got to beat this person. I got to win the game. I got to get to the end of this game. In a infinite game, like health, okay, there is no end game. There is no winner and loser, okay? As long as you keep playing, you cannot lose. And so ultimately what you need to know is that finite games are played against others and there is competition and there are competitors versus infinite games. There is only competition against yourself. And so the goal of an infinite game is to just keep playing, while the goal of a finite game is to try and win the game. This is why it's so important to understand what game you are playing, okay? Here are some examples of finite games versus infinite games, right? We talk about finite games, a lot of the typical things that you would think about. But here's the thing, most people don't understand that health, wealth, relationships, connection to something greater, life as a whole, all of those things are infinite games. Like I said, inside of the guide, there's a lot of other descriptions of the difference between finite and infinite games. Let me go ahead and give you a couple examples to really hit this home. The game of business is an infinite game, right? You go ahead and have money, you create a product, you ship the product, have customers pay you money, and you keep going on and on and on. Versus baseball, like we talked about, there's a start and there is an end. And so the game of business is an infinite game that has pre-existed before every single company on the planet and is going to outlast every single company that exists today. You cannot win business. There is no winning an infinite game because it's an infinite game, right? The goal of business is to just stay open and to make a better product than you did yesterday. You're competing against yourself and the rules are always changing. There is no finish line. And so in an infinite game, the game cannot be won, only played. And because it cannot be won, all you do is you just enjoy the journey for the sake of the game. You enjoy the process. In an infinite game, the point is not to win. The point is to just keep playing because there is no such thing as winning in an infinite game, right? In an infinite game, as long as you are in the game, you are winning, right? And so I'm going to say these points over and over and over again in many different ways to try and really hit this home for you, okay? Let's go ahead and look at another example. Let's look at the infinite game of health when compared to the finite game of baseball, okay? You cannot win health. You need to understand this. Health is an infinite game. And so that means that if health is an infinite game, that means that there is no end. There is no winning to the game of health. Quote unquote, winning in the game of health is just about keep on playing. And so meaning as long as you are playing, as long as you are working on your health, you are in the game and that means that you are winning. Is this starting to make sense? Again, remember, I'm going to say this in a bunch of different ways because I know sometimes it is a little bit abstract and I really want you to get an understanding of this. The same goes for relationships and connection to something greater. There is no such thing as coming in first place and winning in marriage or friendship. Same thing goes for the infinite game of education. Even though school might be finite, there is no such thing as winning education. Same goes for job promotions. We can beat out other candidates for a job or a promotion, but no one is ever crowned winner of careers. It doesn't exist because it's an infinite game. No matter how successful you are in life, when we die, none of us is declared the winner of life. There is no such thing because life is an infinite game. And so all of these things are journeys. Infinite games are journeys, they are not events, right? These are all races that never end. Even if you hit your targets, the game never ends. Just because you hit your quarterly revenue target, or you hit how much money you wanted to make, or you hit how much you wanted to weigh, well, guess what? The game still never ends, right? And so all of these things are infinite games, not finite games. And this is why you need to understand the game that you are playing. And this is so important to understand. The game of health, money, business, relationships, marriage, faith, spirituality, it cannot be won. It can only be played. The only way to lose is if you stop playing. And so as long as you keep playing, you are winning. As long as you don't stop, you cannot lose. And so this is a very, very therapeutic understanding and a very therapeutic concept because you realize, oh man, no matter how overwhelmed I am, no matter how bad I feel, no matter how behind I feel, guess what? As long as I don't stop, I cannot lose, because that is how infinite games are played. And so if you want to be successful in life, you want to make sure that you are making that mindset switch to understand the game that you are playing, because life, business, and health are all infinite games. And so what that means is that you need to focus on the process rather than the outcome, because at the end of the day, outcomes are temporary in infinite games because the games keep on going. And so what you need to understand from this is that you might go through a season and it might feel like a mini finite game for you, right? You might have a season of life in which you are in a mini sprint and you're really focused on a specific target. And it might feel like for you that felt like a mini finite game. And so visually, let's say for example, you're going from 214 pounds and you're going down to 185 pounds. You're like, well, hey, Coach Yasin, isn't that a finite game? I'm going to get to my end goal of 185 pounds, right? Hey, that's the winning. I'm going to win this game right here, right? Someone might say, see, that is a finite game. Once I hit that target, isn't the game over? Wrong. Because even when you hit that target, did the game of health all of a sudden just end, right? This is especially where people mess up. They forget that health is an infinite game. And so when you zoom out, you realize, oh snap, even though I got from 214 to 185, guess what? The game of health is an infinite game. It does not end. And so even though that mini sprint felt like a finite game, it was really just a part of the infinite game. And so that is what it is that we need to understand what we are talking about when we talk about infinite games and finite games, because health doesn't all of a sudden become a finite game just because we're in a sprint for it, okay? And so this is where people get all messed up. They get so obsessed and they get so wrapped up in that mini sprint that they forget what game they are playing and they try to turn the infinite game into the finite game. And what they have done is they have started playing the infinite game as a finite player. Now you might ask me, Coach Yasin, this is a new term, finite player? What the heck is a finite player, you might ask? Well, let me go ahead and explain that to you as well. Confusing the game that you are playing, okay? So a finite player is someone who plays a finite game against other finite players. So you can think about a batter in baseball games or a basketball player in a basketball game, right? Those are all examples of finite players. They play against other finite players in a finite game that has a clear start and a clear end, right? So a finite player does phenomenal in a finite game, right? They play the game, it ends, and then they go home. There is no more game. And so visually, this is what it looks like. Baseball, football, basketball, soccer, right? All of these are finite games. There's a finite player 1 and a finite player 2. A finite team 1, a finite team 2. There's a start and there's an end. There's agreed upon rules. There's a winner and there's a loser. You basically rush and work as hard as you can against the other competitor. You go ahead and beat them at the end, and then there is a winner and there is a loser. But here's the thing. What happens if someone tries to play an infinite game as a finite player? Well, that's where a whole bunch of issues start. Why? Because what happens is that finite player is all about trying to get to the finish line. That finite player is used to playing a game in which there is a finish line, in which there is a competitor that they have to beat in order for them to be able to win the game. And so they're used to playing a different game. They have a different mindset. And so this is what it looks like. The finite player, all of a sudden, they're used to having a start and an end. They come in here and they start playing this infinite game, health, wealth, relationships, connection to something greater, right? And so when someone tries to play an infinite game like health, business, relationships, faith as a finite player, what it does is it leads to a lot of problems like, 1, comparing yourself to others, constantly looking at others in the game, getting frustrated why you aren't getting to your goals faster, wanting to quit because of frustration, obsessed with the outcomes and the results, and so many other issues happen when this person approaches the infinite game with a finite player mindset. And what happens when the finite player comes up against somebody who is an infinite player? What happens when somebody comes up against someone like that? Well, when a finite player comes up against an infinite player, so you can see here, this is a finite player and this is an infinite player, right? A finite player in an infinite game will always lose to an infinite player, aka someone who is playing with an infinite game mindset. So an infinite player is somebody who is playing with an infinite game mindset. Why will the finite player always lose? Because of the fact that the objective of the infinite game is to keep playing. But the finite player, right, when they're playing this game, they're in a rush. They want to go ahead and finish. They want to go ahead and say, hey, when is this game going to end? So that way I can win. And then that way I can go ahead and be the victor. But the problem is that infinite games don't end. And so what happens is that the finite player gets frustrated and gets tired and ends up quitting. What ends up happening is that they end up taking off their gloves and they no longer want to keep playing because they are too tired. And all of this happens because of the fact that they approached the game with the wrong mindset. So you can see on here, this guy, he's playing the infinite game. He has the infinite game mindset because he knows he's playing the infinite game, right? Versus the finite player, he or she gets tired. He says, hey, when is this game going to end? When am I going to win this game? But here's the thing, there is no winning the game of life, health, wealth, relationships, or connection to something greater. And so this finite player takes off their gloves and decides, you know what, I'm quitting. I'm not going to play this game no more. And if you remember, the only way that you actually quote unquote lose an infinite game is to stop playing. And so there are no winners or losers. There's only people who play the game and there are people who no longer are playing the game. And so when this person drops out, guess what? They are no longer playing the game because they approach it with the wrong mindset. And so here's my question for you. Are you focusing on what you get out of an experience, or are you focusing on who you become out of an experience? Because finite players with finite mindsets ask, hey, what am I getting out of this, right? They are outcome oriented. Versus infinite players, they ask, who am I becoming? What am I becoming out of this? They are process and journey oriented, right? And so because if you are playing a life as an infinite player, it's all about the process. It's all about the journey. It's not about the outcome and the destination, because life is an infinite game, right? The same goes for competition and comparison. Are you comparing yourself to those who you see on social media, or are you focusing on being a little bit better than you were yesterday? Because in a finite game, finite players compete and compare against each other in order to win, right? But in an infinite game, the only competition is yourself and your previous record. And so this is what it looks like visually. When you are actually playing the infinite game with an infinite player mindset, the only competition is you against yourself, because at the end of the day, this game is going to go on and on and on. And so there is no winning or losing. You cannot beat somebody else. You cannot compare to somebody else. And so if you are playing life as an infinite player, then comparison is pointless, because when you compare in an infinite game like life, health, business, etc., you are going to end up back in finite player mode because you are stuck trying to compare yourself to everybody else in the game. And when you are trying to compare yourself in an infinite game, you're going to end up getting tired, exhausted, and eventually you're going to quit because you are playing the wrong type of game with the wrong type of player. And so that is what you need to understand about the difference between the infinite game and the finite game. Because in the end, obsessing over the outcome, trying to win, trying to follow the rules and the dogma, trying to compete and beat the competition, comparing yourself to others, being in a rush and getting frustrated and tired. All of these things are impossible in games that have no finish lines, aka health, business, relationships, connection to something greater, and life. And so when we lead with a finite mindset in infinite games, it creates a lot of frustration with life. Too many people think they have problems in their life, but what they lack is a proper perspective understanding of the game that they are in. And so when you switch your mind and understand the game that you are playing, the game of life that you are playing is an infinite game. 90% of all your problems just disappear when you make that mindset shift, okay? So the difficulties in life are not the problems themselves, but what we expect those things to be like, because we're expecting the game of life to be a finite game, when in reality, it is an infinite game that you are going to continue to play until the day that you die. Ladies and gentlemen, mind blown. This is a mental model that is going to be absolutely transformational for you to have in understanding the game that you are playing. This is why it's critical to recognize the game that we are playing and the type of player that we are being, so that way we can lead with the right mindset. This mindset shift has been one of the biggest paradigm shifts of my entire life when I made the switch years ago to becoming an infinite player. And so my question to you is, right, we talk about finite games and we talk about infinite games. My question to you is this: are you playing a finite game, or are you playing an infinite game? Are you playing as a finite player, or are you playing as an infinite player? If you are an infinite player playing an infinite game, then you must remember No matter how overwhelmed or behind you feel, the infinite game has no winners and it has no losers. It only has people who are playing and those people who are no longer playing. And so that means that as long as you don't stop playing, you cannot lose. Infinite players focus on the journey and the process, not on the destination or the outcomes. As long as you keep showing up as an infinite player in an infinite game, you cannot lose. And if you play stupid games, you'll get stupid prizes, okay? So don't get caught being a finite player in an infinite game, because that's when you're gonna get royally screwed, okay? So make the shift to becoming an infinite player inside of the infinite game of life, of business, of health, of relationships, of a connection to something greater. Make that a part of your identity. Become the infinite player identity, because ultimately, remember, we talked about how your version of yourself is what's responsible for creating your current situation. And I can't tell you how many people, how many students I've come across who are trying to play the game of life, of business, of health as finite characters, as finite players. And so as a result, that keeps them away from being able to get what they actually want in life. And so when we go back and talk about the concerns that some students might have and say, hey, I still don't have a six-pack though, right? I can't do this, right? Going back to that concern, we already talked about the 3 points. We talked about those 3 things. But here is your big takeaway from this. If you say, hey, once I get into the best shape of my life, then I will be qualified to be a remote wellness practitioner. Guess what? You are forgetting what game you are playing, if that is what you are saying, because health is an infinite game. And so if this is going to be your career and your business for you, right, which is an infinite game, then what happens in those seasons in life where you aren't in the best shape of your life? Do you all of a sudden stop being an RWP? Right? If you are playing the infinite game, you understand that there will be seasons in your life where you're not going to be in the best shape. And then there are going to be seasons in your life where you are. Because guess what? The game of health and the game of business and the game of life continues. And so in the end, it doesn't matter, because it is an infinite game. And so when you learn marketing and sales, when we talk about that in phase number 2, that is when you're also going to further realize that at the end of the day, people are not purchasing you necessarily, right? What it is, it's all about what the student actually wants. And you're going to learn more about that when we talk about marketing and sales in phase number 2, okay? Now, I want to go ahead and make a note on this. Obviously, this is within reason, because if you're like 300 plus pounds and morbidly obese and you're not practicing what you preach, then obviously that might impact your credibility. But I hope you get the point that I'm trying to make here, is that if you are not in the best shape of your life that you've ever been, then that's okay, because it's the infinite game. And there are going to be seasons in which you are in the best shape of your life, and there's seasons in which you are not. And that's okay, all right? And then finally, a closing note on this entire topic on here. We did not just make everything that you just learned about up. Yes, the infinite game and everything we talked about is in fact a real thing in science and mathematics. Just in case you were wondering, it wasn't just something we made up. It is in fact a real thing, and is in fact a very, very important transformational paradigm shift that you can make in your approach of life, as well as the 4 areas of life. Beautiful. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into the activity for this final training inside of this module. We're going to close out with a really, really cool activity that is called the past, present, future me activity. And so what we're going to be doing is, for this activity, to close out this module, we're going to go ahead and take a moment to walk you through a very powerful activity. And this is actually an activity that you are going to walk your students through as well in the future at the end of their program, okay? And so even though your program here at RWA is not over, there is a very big milestone that we are going ahead and crossing right now, because we are making the switch and switching gears from literally talking about you being in your health journey, and that module is really ending, because now we're going to be talking about how to structure your program and the skills you need to be a coach and all that kind of stuff, okay? And so to help you make the transition in mindset, what we are going to do is we're going to work on closing this chapter before we go ahead and open a new one. And how we do that is we do that by doing the past, present, future me activity. And so this is a very fun activity that has a lot of foundations in transformational science and the benefits of the mind. And so what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and go into the quick mini training that is going to walk you through the instructions for that. And then we're going to go ahead and come back and talk about some of the benefits of this activity as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and cut to the mini training for this activity. All right, welcome to this quick mini training about the past, present, future me activity. So this activity is going to be divided into basically 3 parts. As you can imagine, there's the past me, there is the present me, and then there is the future me. And so let's go ahead and talk about the instructions for each of these parts right here. So the very first part is the past me section of this activity. So on here you can see, can you believe it was only one module ago that you started learning about the science of transformation, right? It's crazy to think it was just only one module ago, right? Because we went through so much. And so what we're going to do is inside of this first part, we're going to go back in a time machine and we're going to go back to before you started this module, okay? And so the instructions is you're going to go ahead and think back to who you were then before you started this module. You're going to go back and think, who was the person who decided to say yes to starting this journey, right? And what you want to do is you want to picture who that you is in your mind. And then once you have a clear picture of that you version of yourself, the past me version of yourself, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and complete the following sentence starters. And the first sentence starter on here is, before I started this journey, I was struggling with blank. And so right here, if you want to do the electronic version, again, obviously, as always, I didn't mention this from the beginning, but make sure you click File, Make a Copy, because you will not be able to edit this template. But then you're going to go ahead and complete inside of this sentence starter right here. You're going to put, hey, I was struggling with, and then make a list, add a couple things, whatever it is, even if it's just one word. Hey, just put it in there. What were you struggling with? And then number 2, if there is one word or short phrase to describe me back then, it would be blank. And so you're going to go ahead and put either one word or a short phrase to be able to describe the past version of yourself, the one that actually had just started module 3. Okay, so that is part 1. Very simple, very straightforward, right? Let's go ahead and go to part 2, which is present me. And present me, there are actually 2 steps to the present me. So you see here, present me step 1 and present me step 2. So present me step 1 is titled What I Loved and Discovered. And so the instructions say to complete this step, you're going to want to reference your notes from each training. You're going to want to reference the guides for each training and the guide for this main training that summarizes everything for you. So again, if you don't have any notes from the previous trainings, it's okay. Notes are actually not required at all. That's actually why we provide for you each training's guide inside of the action step. So you can open the guides for each training as well as, or alternatively, you can look back at the main training and how we summarized everything, right? We summarized everything that was on there. Once you go ahead and have that open, what you're going to do is that for each of the 4 pillars of health, you are going to fill the table in with the things that you loved and what you discovered about yourself. Now, number 1 thing on here is don't worry about trying to include or remember everything about each training. There's not enough space for you to do that, and don't make this like a 50,000 page activity, okay? What you are doing is you're just putting in here the stuff that mattered to you the most right now in the stage of life that you are in, right? So there was a lot of stuff that we talked about. We said a lot of that stuff is going to serve as a reference for the rest of your life. But what were the things that you found most applicable and mattered to you the most in the phase of life that you are in? And again, it does not have to be in 6W format. So here we go is nutrition. Nutrition, the concept that I loved about nutrition, I really loved when we talked about the blood sugar roller coaster, because me and my family struggle with type 2 diabetes. And so when I learned about the blood sugar roller coaster, that was awesome. And then I also really loved learning about metabolism. Beautiful. And then things I discovered about myself when it came to nutrition. XYZ, you're going to fill that in right there. Then you're going to go into the second pillar, which is movement. And what were concepts that you learned about movement that you really loved, right? Maybe you loved, hey, I really loved reframing exercise into movement. I really love the play concept and being able to introduce play into movement, right? And then things I discovered about myself when it came to movement. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Whatever it is that comes to mind, okay? Then sleep, okay? What are some things that I loved about sleep? And then things that I discovered about myself when it came to sleep. I realized that I call myself a night owl, and I realized that, hey, it's a game changer when I actually sleep at 8:30 and I'm able to wake up at 4 a.m. and my entire life is transformed. XYZ, whatever it is. And then finally for recharge, what are some of the concepts from the recharge training inside of this module that you loved? And what were some of the things that you discovered about yourself when it came to recharge? Okay, so that is step number 1 for present me. And then we're going to get into step number 2 for present me, and that is the reflection portion, okay? So now that you've filled in what stood out to you and what mattered the most from the pillars and what you discovered about yourself, it's now time to take a few minutes to reflect, right? How does it feel to have learned so much, right? Complete the following sentence starters. When I see all of the concepts that I've learned and all of the things that I discovered about myself, I feel Put right there. I feel amazing. I feel like my life has been changed. I feel like this was a game changer for me. Whatever it is that you feel, go ahead and put it right there. You're just reflecting, okay? Don't worry about my examples. Don't write what I'm saying on here. Write what you feel so that way you can actually close this chapter here in Module 3 for yourself, right? And then finally, if there was one word or short phrase to describe me right now, it would be this, right? So you can see here the theme, one word or short phrase to describe me from the past, and then one word or short phrase to describe me right now. And so that is going to be part 2 of this activity, which completes the present me, both the step 1 and the step 2. From there, we go ahead and go to the last part for this activity, which is the future me. And so the instructions for this say, now that you've gone ahead and you understand all of this new knowledge about health, wellness, transformation, growth, life, and yourself, what's next? Because you are at this new peak of your life, you have this new vantage point, right? You're up on this new mountain that you've never been on before. How is your future going to be? Because now that you're at the top of this new vantage point, on top of this new mountain, you can see different horizons. And so we're going to take a second and utilize this very valuable moment on top of this new mountain, right? Before we get back to work, before we get to trying to climb the next mountain, we want to take a couple minutes to reflect. And what I want you to do is I want you to forget about how all of this knowledge that you've gone ahead and learned is going to help other people for a moment. I don't want you to think about that. What we're going to go ahead and talk about is explore what you really want for yourself next. Not what do you want for other people and all that kind of stuff. We are talking about what you want for yourself next. Why is that important? The reason why it's important is because the truth is that when we show up as who we want to be, when we show up as our best version of ourselves, then guess what? It's actually easier to be able to help others and other people benefit automatically, okay? And so what we're gonna go ahead and do is we're gonna go ahead and complete some of these sentence starters. And so right here, we're gonna say, if there was one word or short phrase to describe my future self, it would be, so you can see here, we've gone ahead and done the same question for the past me, the present me, and now we're talking about the future me, right? From this new vantage point, on top of this new mountain, this new future self is going to be what, okay? Whatever it is. It doesn't have to be within a certain domain, kind of similar to like a becoming journal-esque kind of thing, but we're just kind of doing a mini version of that, okay? The truth is that I want for myself next, after Module 3, is what, okay? The best part about that, the best part of what I want next for myself is going to be what? It would benefit others in my life because, right, the thing that you want next for yourself, it's going to benefit others in your life because, and then you're giving yourself permission. The permission I'm giving myself to is what? Okay. And so all of that is based off of this question, which is, hey, what is it that I want for myself next as I am closing this chapter of Module 3? Now, very important note that I want to go ahead and make here, okay? These questions right here are not doctrine written in stone that cannot be changed, okay? These are just sentence starters. Don't take these like a remote control student who's like, oh man, okay, I got to answer these exact same questions. If none of these questions make any sense to you, throw them out the window and ask yourself questions that do make sense for you, okay? And so don't get caught up with these specific questions. All you're doing is you're just journaling and writing from this new vantage point and looking at, okay, what is it that I want to focus on next? What is it that I do want? And where am I headed from this new vantage point that I can see? Okay, so don't take and obsess over these questions. They're not written in stone. And if you really don't resonate with them, and it's okay. They're just sentence starters. You can use other questions that might come better for you. Okay, so that is part number 3, which is the future me part of this activity. And so ultimately that is the past, present, and future me activity. Again, remember, this is a very powerful activity that goes ahead and allows us to close a chapter before we open another one. And then let's go ahead and go back to the main training in which we're going to go ahead and talk about a few more benefits of this specific activity. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop back over to the main training. All right, welcome back from that quick mini training about the past, present, future me activity. That activity is extremely, extremely powerful. It is one that is very fun to do as well because you can really start to step back. There are a lot of benefits of this activity. This really is an activity that you can revisit time and time again. When you finish this module, when you finish another module, when you finish different chapters of your life as a whole. And the reason why it's awesome is because it's very common for a lot of us to get caught up at the end of a chapter with the next chapter, right? We immediately think, okay, hey, what's next, right? What am I lacking, right? Oh man, what's next? What's next? What's more? What's more? What's more? And then we also get stuck in thinking maybe I'm not enough. And so the reason why this activity is so powerful is because because it allows us to be able to take a step back and see our own progress and see how far we've come, right? We get a chance to be able to focus on what we do have and what we do want before we actually get back into the game, right? And maybe those questions about do have and do want sound familiar. And the reason that is because those questions come from the Becoming Journal during our daily strategic cadence. So yes, doing your Becoming Journal is what we consider a daily strategic cadence. What is that daily strategic cadence? Well, we talked about this when we talked about the clouds versus the dirt mindset, right? We talked about macro versus the micro. And so this activity, this past, present, future me activity is kind of like a mini strategic cadence that really allows us to disconnect from being in the trenches, right? Inside of module 3, we were so zoomed in into the trenches, focusing on the content. We were really focused on the activities. What it does is that when we step back and we do this clouds activity right here, we do this macro strategic activity, it allows us to recharge ourselves by getting into the clouds before we get into the next module and then go ahead and jump right back into the trenches and really open up that next chapter, which is that next module, right? And so we're constantly switching back and forth between these two mindsets. And so this is what it allows us to be able to do, right? And so do you see how we use that recharge tool and how valuable of a mindset tool it actually is? It's pretty cool when you think about it and how all of it really comes together in terms of what it is that we talked about in a previous training. Now, with that being said, as we start to close out this training here, I do want to go ahead and take a second and I want to go ahead and celebrate you. Because after you complete this activity, it's really important to take a second to really pat yourself on the back, to really give yourself a second to celebrate yourself, right? And that's what I want to do here. Right here at the end of this module, I want to take a second and I want to celebrate you. Because as you end module number 3 and as you go into module number 4, you really are at a new normal in your life, right? You are at a new level. You are looking at life from a new peak, a new mountaintop, a new springboard, right? There are so many more possibilities that are available to you because of all the work that you've done through this module and the momentum that you've created for yourself by climbing this far. And so I am not joking when I say this. When I say, trust me, this is really just the beginning of your career and your journey here at RWA, because as you go through your career, you are going to see more and more and more of how much of a gift this program has been for you. Throughout the rest of your life, you will see how much this entire program is going to impact your entire life. And don't just take my word for it, just watch and see, right? All of this is just the beginning. And what I want you to know is that we understand that what you have done when you have chosen to invest inside of the Remote Wellness Academy is that you have chosen to invest your time, your energy, your financial resources into this program. And you have trusted us with your income, your career, and the livelihood of yourself and your family. And what I want you to know is that we know that it is exactly that. All of that is a responsibility, and we do not take that lightly. And so our main goal here at the Remote Wellness Academy is to over-deliver again and again and again. And our goal is to help you turn what you want for your future into reality. And so what I want you to know is that we here at the Remote Wellness Academy cannot wait to continue to guide you on this journey. And we are honestly so excited and honored to have had this opportunity and privilege to witness what amazingness you are going to unleash to the world as you become the best version of yourself in this program over the next few months. And so ultimately, as we start to celebrate you here at the end of this module, thank you for allowing us to be a part of your journey. It has been an honor to take this ride with you. And I honestly cannot wait to share with you how much more amazing transformation that we have in store for you inside of the upcoming modules. And so if that is not one hell of a way to be able to close out module 3 and really celebrate you as you go through this entire process, I don't know what is. I'm super pumped for you to close out this module and get into the next module after this. With that being said, let's go ahead and talk about your engagement questions for this specific training. Going to be very similar to what it is that we talked about. I want you to go ahead and let us know, hey, fill in the blank. I thought that this training specifically was fill in the blank. Or this training for me was fill in the blank, right? This training was life-changing. This infinite game concept was mind-blowing. This was phenomenal, right? Whatever it is. Again, I say this every time. I don't want to put words in your mouth. But whatever this training was for you, let us know. What did you like and enjoy about this training? What did you think about this training? What were some of your biggest takeaways or ahas from this training as well? Just a reminder, don't be lazy with these. These are really there for you to cement what it is that you learned and for you to be able to provide feedback. And then finally, let's get into your action steps. When we talk about your action steps, there are 4 of them. Number 1 is going to be for you to go ahead and watch this training and study it in full. Number 2 is for you to go ahead and complete the engagement questions for this training, the ones that we just went ahead and talked about above. Number 3 is to complete the past, present, future me activity, the one we went ahead and talked about. And then number 4, after you've gone ahead and completed that activity, you are going to comment on the student community post for that activity. And you are going to let us know. Now, you don't have to number these are just sentence starters, but it would be awesome to get all of this from you. But these are just sentence starters to get your mind going, which is number 1, what did it feel like to look back at who you were before you started this module? Number 2, how did it feel to see all the things that you loved and discovered about yourself from this module? Number 3, how does it feel to look back at how far you've come through this module? Number 4, what are your thoughts on this module as a whole, right? Fill in the blank. I thought this module was fill in the blank. This module for me was fill in the blank. So similar to what it is that you did in the first engagement question that was specifically for the training, this question right here is specifically for the module as a whole, right? All 4 pillars, everything that we went through inside of this module. How was this module for you, right? And then number 5, what are you most looking forward to in the upcoming modules? And I went ahead and put together a little bit of a reference guide for you, just so that way you can get an idea of what's upcoming. Okay, so you don't have to know this, but I just want to kind of plant the seed for you in your mind. So module 4, which is the next module after this, we're going to be talking about learning the skills to be able to influence people so that people will actually listen to you when you actually help them transform their life, which is going to be called the coaching skills. Okay. Module 5 is going to be about starting to put together your 12-week transformation program using the template that we provide. And so that way you can start practicing it. And so that way you are ready to get new students. And then finally, module 6, which is the final module inside of phase number 1, is going to be where we actually launch your remote wellness practice. Okay. So that's where we're going to go ahead and get your remote wellness practice up and running. We're going to show you how to get that rocking and rolling in under 48 hours. We're going to be providing you all of the swipe files, templates, copy and paste. Everything's going to be super easy for you to do, as well as getting your first test clients/students. Okay. So that is what is upcoming for the rest of phase number 1. And so you can go ahead and let us know here, what are you most looking forward to in the upcoming modules? Again, remember, you don't have to number these. If you want to number them, phenomenal, go ahead. If you don't want to number them, that's fine as well. These are just sentence starters, but I would love to hear from you. What are your thoughts from the activity? And what are your thoughts about this entire module as a whole? With that being said, that is your 4 action steps for this training. It has been an absolute pleasure here in module 3. I am super looking forward to catching you inside of the next module. With that being said, Coach Yasin checking out. And as always, I will catch you in the next training.